on their wavelength, and our communications are as clear as they possibly can be. Accurate, clear, and obviously brief enough as well for the person to understand it. And I'm going to put 6 bullet points up on the screen here on how we can improve a communication. And maybe you could add to them if there's something that you feel would be able to improve communication that I don't cover, then we'd love to hear your comments as well. So the first one is planning the communication. It might be that you're going to have a meeting with somebody, and so you decide, I'm going to plan this as I go to the meeting. And it might be that you're planning it on the way to sit with that person. If it's a short meeting, you maybe don't have to do too much in the way of planning. If it's a big meeting with a big client, maybe you have to do a lot more planning. But that planning actually is going to help you with the communication. And I mentioned earlier using the acronym PIMS. I'll tell you about that on the next slide, in fact. The next point is to be aware of the state of the other person. Are they relaxed? Could they be uptight, enthusiastic? Have they got things on their mind? What kind of impact do you think their state of mind is going to have when you're communicating with them?
Wait, what? Sorry, ask that question again. What thing come up?
Yeah. As I mentioned here on the screen, everybody can see the screen okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Be aware of the state of the other person. What effect do you think their state of mind might have on their acceptance of your communication and vice versa?
Well, they could be receptive to what you're saying. They could be defensive for some reason and reject what you're saying or refuse to hear it.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry, carry on.
Or filtering out the parts they don't want or that would cause them some kind of problem.
That's right. And that's called selective listening, of course, isn't it? So you select the bits that you think are right, and maybe you ignore or delete the bits that you think aren't agreeable, if you like. So you see these two gentlemen talking here. You probably would think that they are very, very engrossed in the conversation. And so it would be easier for them to communicate with each other because they're establishing the eye contact. They're obviously listening to each other, and they're immersed in what they're saying to each other. So by just looking at those two people there, you probably see that they have a lot in common, and they're obviously having an intense conversation there as well. So be aware of the state, the feelings that the other person may have. But also be aware of how you are coming across. What's being read by your attitude, how you're saying things in many cases is more important and has a bigger impact than what you say. And so if your body language is open and in a sharing positive way, that's obviously going to have an effect on the way that the other person takes that information in. So be aware of how you come across. And as you just mentioned, watch their body language. That's important as well, so that you recognize how they might be taking in this information. So you can improve your communication by maybe they're not taking the information in. You see it by the way that they're looking. They might grimace or they might look away. Whatever it is, just be aware of how they are taking that information in. And as we mentioned earlier, accuracy, brevity, and clarity is most important, so that the person has you're speaking at their level. You mentioned this earlier, Danielle. They're speaking at your level, and you're speaking at their level as well, making understanding. And probably one of the most important things in improving communication, of course, is to solicit their feedback, to ask them for their opinions. What do they think about this situation? Rather than just being a one-way monologue, all communication is shared backwards and forwards. So there's there's about 6 small bullet points there that will help you when you're trying to improve your level of communication. Do you have any other suggestions, things that work for you, and you want to share so that we can maybe add to that list as well?
I would say just once you get an assessment of the person's state, knowing when to approach them. So if it's something that's not urgent, maybe waiting until, they've settled in for the day, or maybe even waiting until they've completed a deadline. Obviously, if it's something urgent, then you do need to address it and communicate. But I would say assessing the situation before actually approaching them is important.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because if you've got, poor communication or whatever, what you might want to do is to book a time with a person. I sometimes do this with my team members. Rather than just going up to them and saying, hey, can I have 5 minutes with you? If I see that they're really engrossed, it might be better for me to say, look, can I have 5 minutes of your time, say in half an hour? Because if they're in the middle of something, they might think they've got to break off from that and communicate with me, but they might not be in the right state of mind. So you're absolutely right. If they're not in the right state, it may be that you say, look, when would be a better time for you? And it might be that just to make sure that you overcome some of those poor communication habits that you might have, that you do have a 10-minute meeting just to maybe confirm with people what their understanding is of how the project is going, or an issue with a particular client. Actually book that person's time, because I find that when I book the time in my team members' diaries, they take it a lot more seriously than if I just do an ad hoc interruption. So if I say, look, I'd like to have a quick 5-minute meeting with you at, say, 12:30, they then take that a lot more seriously, and they'll come into my office with maybe a notepad and pen, rather than just sitting at the desk and having a quick chat. That's only, of course, when you want to have some more formal communication with them. But if you can do that, it makes it a little more serious for them as well. So I think this state of mind is really, really important. Make sure that they are very receptive, as opposed to you just barging in. And remember, if they've got something on their mind, if they're in the middle of an email and then you interrupt them, they may not be giving you full attention. So that's a good point that you're making. Thank you. Any further points on improving your communication?
Staying on track, whatever the topic is. I think a lot of times that can be difficult, especially with clients.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of, questions about, the discussion that you're focusing on, but also things that they want to do, in the future or in parallel. So I think it's easy to kind of get off track and not stay on topic.
It is. You're absolutely right. Is that Colby?
This is Brian.
Sorry, Brian. Sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right, of course. And trying to keep a meeting on track, if you're the facilitator, is one of the hardest jobs that you can do. But I think this idea of PIMS, I think you'll find it useful, because for more formal meetings or more formal communications, PIMS actually works really, really well. Let me just show you this model, which I developed a few years ago. And it really helps us to maybe set the right tone for the meeting, but also to keep it on track as well, if you do find that the meeting is going off track. PIMS, of course, the drink, PIMS. Anybody like it?
I don't think I've ever had it.
Me neither.
You've not heard of it? Not heard of it? Okay, it's a drink that you normally have with, say, fruit or as a cocktail or something like that. And as you see from the slogan there, it's PIMS o'clock somewhere in the world. So PIMMS, it's the brand name of a drink. If you Google it, you'll find what it can go with as well. But I've got these 5 letters, PIMMS, and I'm putting them into an acronym. So I'll just launch it for you and get your viewpoint on it, essentially. So the P, the first letter P, obviously stands for purpose. What is the purpose of the communication? I'm going to give you a couple of examples in the future slides, but it's a great question to ask. Obviously, for more formal communications, say you're going to be writing an important email, or you've got an important phone call coming up with a client, or you're going to have a meeting with a client, it's always good to think through, and of course you can think between 6 and 9 times quicker than you can talk. So what is the purpose of the communication? The I stands for intention. What's my intention behind the communication? So the purpose and intention. The intention is always the result that I'm hoping to achieve from this. And it might be different from the purpose, but we'll show you that in an example in just a few moments. The purpose and intention behind the communication then leads to the third letter, the first M, and that is, what meaning, M for meaning, do you want the other person to go away with? So if you're going to be having a conversation with someone, the end result, how would you like them to assimilate this information, and what result would you like at the end of it too? So those first 3 are really important before you do the second M. How many of you have sat down sometimes and said, right, I'm going to write an email, what should I say? That's the wrong way of going about it, because the second M in PIMS is method. What method should I use to communicate based on the first three letters, P, I, and M. What's the purpose